Hello, I'm Edgard. I am 29 years old and reside in a quaint little town in upstate New York known as Briarwood. It's a setting where familiarity reigns, and the pace of life unfolds gently. There aren't numerous large urban areas or bright neon signs in this place. It's serene, tranquil, perhaps a touch too serene on occasion. I've always had a fondness for it, however. It evokes a sense of belonging. As a project manager in a mid-sized tech firm, my life was fairly routine until one seemingly simple favor changed everything dramatically. I never gave my job much thought. It's a satisfactory role, not quite what I envisioned for myself, but it covers my expenses. I reside in a cozy apartment situated conveniently close to my workplace. I have a few dear friends, primarily from my college days. My existence is cozy, routine, and largely devoid of excitement. Indeed, there are moments when I long for a bit more thrill, yet one tends to acclimate to the everyday rhythm. Rise, head to the office, enjoy a beverage with companions, retire for the night, and do it all over again. That was the essence of my existence. Everything shifted on a Thursday afternoon, however. It began just like any other day. After concluding a meeting with the development team, I was on my way to my desk when an email from my boss, Mark Witt, landed in my inbox. Mark stands out as an unconventional leader. He's a solid individual, grounded in reality, somewhat traditional, yet consistently just. Having collaborated for several years, I've held him in high regard, yet I never anticipated that we would be venturing into personal territory. The email was concise. Edgar, would you be so kind as to assist me with something? Evelina, my wife, is currently held up at the office following a meeting. She intends to grab a cab home, but if you could stop by and offer her a ride, I would be truly grateful. Is it along your route, then? To be honest, it didn't really cross my mind. I had a brief moment before my next meeting, and it was conveniently located. Additionally, Mark had come to my aid on several occasions when I required some time away or a favor at the last minute. I responded with a straightforward, sure, no problem. I wasn't particularly familiar with Evelina. I had noticed her in the office on several occasions, naturally. She is Mark's wife, consistently attired with elegance, exuding an aura of refinement. Though she has a few years on me, she still appeared fantastic. She stands tall and exudes confidence, impeccably groomed, embodying the essence of someone who always seems to have everything in order. However, our conversations were limited to brief exchanges during office gatherings or festive celebrations. As I arrived at the building housing her office, I spotted her on the sidewalk, absorbed in her phone. As I lowered the window, she glanced up and offered a smile. Her smile radiated warmth and friendliness, making me feel as though I was doing more than just assisting a boss's wife in a difficult situation. I was assisting someone who truly valued it. Hey, I appreciate this, Edgard, she remarked as she settled into the passenger seat. Mark mentioned that you would be glad to assist. Absolutely, it's no bother whatsoever, I responded, aiming for a laid-back tone. Being in the car with her was unexpected, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of awkwardness that settled in. It was meant to be nothing more than a straightforward journey, wasn't it? The journey began in silence. I chose to remain silent, not wanting to impose anything that could feel contrived, so I directed my attention to the road ahead. Yet, Evelina shattered the stillness with a straightforward inquiry. How is your work progressing? I was grateful for her inquiry. Conversing with her felt effortless, and it alleviated some of the pressure in the moment. We discussed our work, focusing on the project I was overseeing, and she offered some insights into her own job too. The exchange was marked by a polished, formal tone, typical of interactions where familiarity is lacking, yet there's a desire to bridge the gap with dialogue that remains comfortably distant. As the journey progressed, we meandered into lighter subjects. She inquired about my interests, and I realized I was sharing more than I typically would. I wasn't one to engage in much conversation, yet somehow, it seemed more effortless to speak with her than I had anticipated. Perhaps it was her attentive nature, or perhaps it was her sincere curiosity about my thoughts that drew me in. We even laughed about some of the absurd things that occurred in the office. As I turned into her driveway, it struck me how swiftly the journey had passed. I hadn't realized how much time had passed while we were engaged in conversation. It simply felt instinctive. As I shifted the car into park, she glanced at me, her smile brightening the moment. "That was quite pleasant," she remarked. "I appreciate the lift, Edgar. You turned out to be much more at ease than I anticipated." "It was no trouble at all," I replied, a hint of embarrassment creeping in as I realized how effortlessly I had engaged in conversation with her. I found myself unaccustomed to conversing with someone of such refinement, yet the experience was quite enjoyable. "Take care, Edgar," she said, her hand moving toward the door handle. Yet, just as she was about to exit the car, she hesitated. "If you ever find yourself in need of assistance, feel free to reach out without hesitation. Mark frequently praises your helpfulness." I smiled and nodded, yet as she shut the door and approached her front entrance, an unsettling feeling stirred within me. It was nothing particular, merely a strange sensation as if something had changed. Yet, I brushed it aside. It was merely a journey, simply a kindness. Unbeknownst to me, that seemingly ordinary ride would mark the start of a transformation that would alter everything. A few days following that drive, the atmosphere at work seemed altered. I found myself questioning whether it was merely my perception or if it was something real. Yet, whenever Evelina visited the office or I encountered her in the hallway, an unusual tension lingered in the air. Nothing overt, yet subtle nuances lingered, how her gaze would linger just a heartbeat longer, or the way her smile seemed to carry a deeper significance. I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself that I was just overanalyzing the situation. I might have been overthinking it, yet it occurred once more. On a Wednesday afternoon, I found myself at my desk, perusing a few emails on my phone. A message arrived from Evelina. "Hey Edgar, I realize this is last minute, but could you possibly give me a ride home today? Mark is currently occupied with a meeting, and I would prefer not to wait for a taxi." It felt unusual, she had never reached out to me in this way before. For a brief moment, I paused. Am I right to decline? Ought I to establish a boundary? I felt uncertain, yet I also wished to avoid coming across as impolite. Moreover, it was merely a journey. "Absolutely," I responded without hesitation. The sun was still shining as I made my way to her office, and upon my arrival, she was already standing by the door, waiting. She greeted me with a wave as I arrived, and I lowered the window. "Hey, Edgar, thanks for this," she said, a smile gracing her lips. This time, her tone carried a gentle warmth, inviting a sense of intimacy. "Absolutely fine." I assured them it was no trouble at all, attempting to maintain a relaxed demeanor. She got into the car and instantly launched into another discussion about work. Yet, on this occasion, it transcended mere small talk. She inquired about my projects with greater depth, and as our conversation unfolded, I observed her leaning in a bit, as if she was genuinely engaged with every word I shared. Her attention was far from the usual courteous curiosity one might expect from a coworker. It seemed as though she was truly invested. As we approached her home, our discussion meandered once more, veering into more intimate subjects. She shared with me some of the obstacles she encountered in her professional journey, discussing the struggle of balancing her role as a wife while navigating a demanding work atmosphere. As she spoke, I was struck by the fragility in her voice. It felt as though she was revealing her inner thoughts to me, disclosing details she typically reserved for those she was closer to. I paused for a moment, uncertain of how to reply. Being in a car with someone who appeared so composed was challenging, especially as they began to show unexpected flaws in their seemingly perfect exterior. At last, I found my voice. "I'm uncertain if I can accomplish it." "To be honest," I remarked, making an effort to connect. "Juggling work alongside all other aspects of life can be quite challenging." She offered me a subtle, understanding smile. "Indeed, it can be quite challenging, yet there are moments when perseverance is essential." After a brief silence, she continued, "You know, Edgar, I truly value your willingness to listen. Few individuals truly invest the time to engage in genuine listening these days." I found myself feeling somewhat uneasy about the level of intimacy that had developed. I found myself unaccustomed to such a deep connection with someone I hardly knew. Yet, I found it impossible to ignore the fact that I relished the spotlight. It was quite complimentary, and I found myself drawn to it. Upon arriving at her house, I parked the car, and as she stepped out, she glanced back at me with a faint, somewhat uncertain smile. "Thank you once more for the ride," she murmured gently. "Your presence is truly invaluable to me." "It was a pleasure chatting," I responded, aiming to maintain a cheerful atmosphere. Yet, she caught me off guard. As she shut the door, she hesitated for a moment, then turned to me with an expression that seemed to carry a weight beyond the typical courteous farewell. "Edgard," she began, her voice softer now. "I hope this isn't too presumptuous, but if you find yourself free at any point, I would love to share a coffee with you. Only as friends, naturally." I found myself uncertain about how to reply. A part of me felt inclined to decline, to establish a boundary, and maintain a strictly professional demeanor. Yet, there was another part of me that felt an undeniable attraction to her. She possessed allure, exuded self-assurance, and demonstrated sharp intellect. The thought of spending more time with her was undeniably alluring, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. "Of course," I replied after a moment, "that sounds appealing." Her eyes sparkled briefly, and she offered me a final smile before making her way to the door. I lingered in the car for a moment after she disappeared inside, gazing at the vacant street ahead of me. I ought to have been more aware, I should have seen the warning signs. In that instant, clarity eluded me. I found myself immersed in a fleeting moment, contemplating the possibility that perhaps something greater could emerge from this. I navigated the road back, thoughts swirling in my head. What was I up to? What was I even thinking? I had always kept my professional life separate from my personal affairs. Yet with Evelina, it seemed distinct. It seemed effortless. In the days that followed at the office, I made an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy. Yet, I observed a change in Evelina's gaze, her smile hanging in the air just a moment longer than expected. Each time I encountered her in the hallway, curiosity tugged at me, prompting thoughts about what might be swirling in her mind. One morning, as I sat at my desk attempting to concentrate on my tasks, another text from her came through. It was straightforward, yet it stirred a ripple of discomfort within me. "Hello Edgard, I wanted to drop a quick note to remind you about our coffee meeting. What do you think about tomorrow afternoon?" After much contemplation, I finally decided to respond. Uncertainty loomed over me, yet retreat was no longer an option. "Absolutely, tomorrow works perfectly." And just like that, everything had changed. Once more, I find myself uncertain about what our coffee meeting will bring tomorrow. Yet a part of me is already preparing for an unknown eventuality. Our conversations have increased, and I find it increasingly difficult to overlook the way she gazes at me at times. The evening prior to our coffee, I caught myself wandering around my apartment, attempting to concentrate on my typical evening rituals. I found myself glancing at the clock, then my phone, as if I were anticipating something, or perhaps someone. Throughout it all, I found myself questioning whether this was the correct course of action. Was I making a mistake? Was she? We were both involved with others, though her situation felt intricate, or at the very least, not the flawless union it was portrayed to be. Yet, when she messaged me earlier that day to confirm our coffee date, I felt an undeniable pull within me. I reassured myself that it was merely a casual gathering. Is that all there is? The following day, I reached the cafe roughly 10 minutes ahead of schedule, settling into a corner booth to steer clear of any uncomfortable interactions with colleagues. The familiar flutter of nerves began to rise within me. As she entered the room, I found myself struggling to identify her. Evelina was not dressed in her typical professional outfit. No power suit, no high heels. She donned a straightforward black blouse paired with jeans, yet there was an undeniable softness about her. Her typical commanding presence had vanished. What emerged was something that felt more accessible, more open. She noticed me right away, a subtle smile dancing on her lips. I rose swiftly to welcome her, yet I observed her pause at the door for a brief moment before she approached. Her movements held a certain awareness, as if she felt the palpable tension in the air just as keenly as I did. "Hey, Edgar," she said, her voice soft and flowing. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." "Certainly," I responded, attempting to maintain a relaxed demeanor. "How have you been faring?" As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but notice the proximity between us. The quiet hum that lingered between us was inescapable. Initially, we engaged in light conversation. Tasks at hand, the climate, the customary niceties. However, it wasn't long before she guided the discussion into more profound territory. She pondered deeply about her job, her fingers gliding along the edge of her coffee cup as she shared her thoughts concerning my union, regarding all aspects. Her voice wavered for a brief moment before she pressed on. "It can be quite challenging, you see. Struggling to maintain balance amidst the demands of work, family, and the weight of expectations." I found myself uncertain whether she was discussing her marriage or merely venting, yet I remained attentive. I remained silent, allowing her to express herself freely. Though her gaze avoided mine, the fragility in her voice was palpable. She had shared her thoughts with me before, yet this moment carried a unique weight. It seemed genuine. "I understand," I remarked, uncertain of what more to contribute. "At times, the weight of expectations can become overwhelming, can't it?" She nodded, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Absolutely, that's right. I'm uncertain. I feel as though I'm in a rut. I feel overwhelmed trying to manage it all. And then, when I take a moment to reflect, I find myself disliking the image that stares back at me." Her eyes revealed a profound honesty. In that instant, a transformation occurred within me. I was no longer merely observing my superior. I observed a woman, navigating her challenges, much like many others around us. Yet again, she caught me off guard. "Edgar, I must confess something," she said abruptly. Her eyes fixed intently on me. "I've been sensing a strong urge to initiate some transformations in my life." And, her voice faded into silence for a moment. Her eyes revealed a flicker of uncertainty. She inhaled deeply and leaned in a bit closer. "Perhaps I've been contemplating a daring move." The words lingered in the atmosphere, and for a fleeting moment, I found myself uncertain whether I should respond or if she was merely expressing her thoughts freely. "I was uncertain about your meaning," I replied, even though a hint of understanding lingered in my mind. She arched an eyebrow, a playful glimmer dancing in her gaze. "You understand precisely what I'm getting at. It's clear to both of us why I invited you here today." My heart raced with excitement. A wave of suffocation washed over me. All the thoughts swirling in my mind urged me to halt, to turn back. Yet, I found myself unable to shift. I found myself completely immobilized. I believe we've crossed a boundary," I murmured, striving to maintain my poise. "This conversation feels inappropriate." She inclined her head just a bit, her gaze probing into mine. "Why not indeed? I'm simply being truthful with you, Edgar. I sense that our connection has deepened beyond what anyone else at work experiences, and I don't want to act as if it doesn't exist." Her voice took on a gentler tone as she pressed on. "It may not hold any significance, but I can no longer feign ignorance to the changes unfolding around me." My heart raced with anticipation. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance, a tempest of emotions and a myriad of conflicting signals. I parted my lips to speak, yet silence enveloped me. I found myself at a loss for words. I was uncertain about my desires, unsure of what I was meant to seek. The attraction between us was unmistakable, yet this moment was not right. It simply wasn't possible. "Evelina," I finally spoke, attempting to calm my breath. This isn't suitable for either of us. We are both committed to others, and the consequences are significant." She gazed at me for a moment, and in that fleeting instant, I caught a glimpse of disappointment flickering in her eyes. Yet, her demeanor shifted once more, and she reclined in her chair. "Indeed," she replied softly. Perhaps I simply required the reassurance of someone voicing it. I'm uncertain. She shook her head, a soft chuckle slipping from her lips. It seems I'm simply weary of constantly exercising caution. Exhausted from always making the right choices, you feel me? I nodded, uncertain of how to respond. Though I harbored my own doubts about the unfolding events, I couldn't ignore the allure of the possibility that lay between us. The allure was more than mere attraction, it was a profound connection. I'm at a loss too, I confessed, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for you to discuss this with. A quiet moment lingered between us, and then she rose, presenting me with a faint smile. Thank you for your attention, Edgard. That was something I truly required, more than you can imagine. I observed her departure from the cafe, the gravity of her words lingering in the atmosphere, and I found myself questioning whether I had just committed the gravest error of my existence. It's been a few days since our encounter, and I've been striving to maintain a professional demeanor. Yet, each time I catch a glimpse of her at work, I can't help but feel that same irresistible attraction, that compelling energy drawing me in. It's more challenging to overlook than I care to acknowledge. I've been attempting to stay focused on my work, but the way she gazes at me has changed. It's evolved beyond mere professional respect. There's an elusive quality, a sensation that lingers just beyond my grasp, and I sense she is aware of it as well. I've noticed it in her eyes, in the way she hovers by my desk, in those fleeting instances when our gazes meet, and neither of us breaks the connection. I wondered if it was only my perception, if perhaps I was reading too much into it, searching for something elusive. However, that moment arrived following the meeting with the clients. As I concluded a conference call, Evelina entered the office, searching for some files. Her words were few, merely a soft hello as she walked past, yet the atmosphere was charged, palpable and unmistakable. Without a glance in my direction, she stretched up to grab the files from the shelf above my desk. Just as she was on the verge of departure, she hesitated. I cast a fleeting look in her direction. Is everything all right? I inquired, my tone lighter than my true emotions suggested. She paused before turning to face me, her expression inscrutable, yet clearly preoccupied. You're familiar with the experience. Her gaze flickered, yet I noticed the subtle movement of her lips, as if she were restraining a secret. Is there something you're pondering? I inquired more from a gut feeling than for any particular reason. Uncertainty lingered in my mind, yet curiosity pulled me in. She locked eyes with me for a fleeting moment before swiftly averting her gaze once more. It's not a big deal. It's just work-related, she replied dismissively. Yet, there was a gentle quality in her voice that left me questioning whether she was concealing something deeper. I refrained from pressing it. It was clear she wasn't prepared to discuss whatever was troubling her. Yet, as she departed, I sensed a change in the atmosphere surrounding me. The office atmosphere had shifted beyond the ordinary. An unvoiced connection lingered between us, a deeper essence quietly brewing beneath the surface. That evening, I attempted to concentrate on my tasks at home, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to Evelina, to our dialogue, to the way she gazed at me over that coffee, as if she were anticipating my words, my actions. Uncertainty about her desires only intensified the situation. The uncertainty acknowledged me. Silence lingered since our coffee date, but everything shifted with a message that arrived the following morning. It was concise and direct. Could we have a conversation later? I require your assistance with a matter. I gazed at the screen as time seemed to stretch endlessly. My heart began to race. Though she had sought my assistance before, the manner in which she articulated her request struck me as unusual. Her words carried a subtle intensity, as if she were attempting to convey a message without directly articulating it. It was impossible to overlook. I replied, confirming that I would meet her after work. When the moment arrived, I found her at our regular meeting place, just outside the office, close to the entrance of the building. She stood there, waiting for me, seemingly unaware of how the late afternoon sunlight enveloped her in a warm glow. Her gaze held a certain intensity, a spark in her eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. She appeared hesitant, yet she wasn't retreating. Hey, I said, attempting to keep my tone light, even as my heart raced. Hello there. She cast a quick look around, as if ensuring no one was in the vicinity. Once she felt content, she gestured toward the street with a nod. I have to share something that's been weighing on me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Shall we take a stroll? We strolled in silence for several blocks, the only noise accompanying us was the soft murmur of the city enveloping us. The impact of her words lingered heavily in the atmosphere. A presence was approaching. I sensed it deeply. I'd been reflecting on our coffee the other day, she began, her voice wavering, and I find myself feeling somewhat perplexed about it all. I remained silent, allowing her to express herself. I hesitated to break her concentration. Not at this moment. It was evident that this was a topic she wasn't accustomed to discussing. I'm uncertain about my desires now. Edgard, she continued, her voice trembling for the first time. I feel ensnared, and the harder I attempt to dismiss it, the more it intensifies. I find myself constantly reflecting on you, aware that I probably shouldn't, yet I can't help it. I was at a loss for words. A part of me yearned to voice my concerns, to urge her to halt, to express that this was misguided, that we were crossing a line. Yet, there was another side of me, one I despised for its fragility, that craved to know more. I know I shouldn't feel this way, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Yet, I find myself unable to resist, and it's pushing me to the brink of madness. I halted my steps, pivoting to confront her. Evelina, I murmured gently, attempting to unravel the complexities of it all. This isn't something we can pursue. It's simply not acceptable. We are both in committed marriages. There's a lot on the line. She gazed up at me, her eyes probing into mine. But what if it can be something entirely different? What if we allowed ourselves to truly experience emotions for a change? Free of ties, devoid of obligations, simply whatever this may be. I found myself at a loss for words. The allure was present, yet so was the weight of all that could potentially unravel. The repercussions were immense, profoundly significant. I'm not sure, I replied, sensing the heaviness of the circumstances pressing in on me. However, I have my reservations about proceeding with this. A heavy silence lingered between us, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if she might choose to turn and leave. Yet again, she uttered words, her voice trembling. I just need reassurance that it's all right to feel this way, Edgar. I seek reassurance that my desire for something greater is not a sign of madness. Her words carried a palpable vulnerability, a rawness that laid bare her emotions. In that fleeting instant, uncertainty clouded my desires as well. Ultimately, there was one truth I held with unwavering certainty. We could no longer continue on this journey. The repercussions would be overwhelming. I'm uncertain. I reiterated, I simply don't have the answers. She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Perhaps that will suffice for the time being. We lingered in that stillness for a few more moments, both of us frozen in place. At last, Evelina pivoted and departed, leaving me rooted in place, engulfed in uncertainty. I ought to have realized it was fleeting. For weeks, Evelina and I have been navigating a delicate balance, meeting in secrecy, exchanging hushed words in hidden corners. Each time we believed we were exercising caution, that no one had caught on, we reassured ourselves that we held the reins of the situation. However, that was untrue. It all collapsed more swiftly than I could have ever envisioned. A solitary error marked the beginning, a fleeting lapse in judgment. Our encounter took place at a quaint hotel, nestled just beyond the city's edge. It was unexpected. That morning, she reached out to me, expressing a desire to meet. I paused. I was aware that we were tempting fate, yet despite my reservations, I consented. After spending a few hours together, I accompanied her to the parking lot when it was time to part ways. The street lay still, nearly deserted, yet there was an observer among the shadows. At that moment, I was unaware. It was only upon my arrival at work the following morning that I discovered the news. As I entered the office, an unsettling sensation washed over me, something was amiss. People looked my way, their gazes a mix of sympathy and scrutiny. All chatter ceased the moment I walked by. My stomach churned. There was an unsettling feeling in the air. At that moment, the email arrived. Please visit my office. Mr. Harrington never reached out to me directly via email. He was the type of leader who seldom recognized others, unless it was completely unavoidable. Yet now, he was summoning me in. I made my way to his office, my heart racing with anticipation. The moment I crossed the threshold, a sinking feeling washed over me. I was in deep trouble. Evelina occupied a chair opposite him, her presence unmistakable. Her complexion was ashen, her fingers tightly intertwined in her lap. She averted her gaze from me. Then, my gaze fell upon the envelope resting on his desk, a sturdy manila envelope, slightly ajar, revealing just the edge of a printed photograph within. My stomach sank. Take a seat, Harrington instructed. His voice carried an icy detachment. I complied, my thoughts swirling. I shall not squander time, he went on. I possess some photographs. Between the two of you. Several occasions. Various places. It seems there's an observer in the shadows. I had the distinct sensation that I might be unwell. I could dismiss you for a multitude of reasons at this very moment, Harrington continued. However, let's not act as if this is solely about professionalism. You have betrayed me, Edgar, and you. He faced Evelina, his voice laced with rage. Your presence is repulsive to me. Evelina recoiled slightly, yet remained silent. I don't need to create a fuss, he remarked, reclining slightly. Your time here has come to an end. Edgar, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You will be escorted out by security. He faced Evelina, his expression contorting with fury. What about you? Your husband is no longer in your life. Evelina's breath caught in her throat. I have already had a conversation with my lawyer, he mentioned. The divorce papers are set to arrive by the close of business today. I'm claiming it all. The residence, the possessions, all of it. What about you? You shall receive nothing. For the first time since my arrival, Evelina directed her gaze toward him. Unadulterated terror reflected in her gaze. Harrington, if you would be so kind. Put it away, he barked. I prefer not to hear anything from you right now. Words failed me. Every part of me seemed to be fading away. Harrington emitted a sardonic chuckle. Did you really believe you were being cautious? Did you really believe no one would catch on? I have connections all around. You always acted without caution. Your performance was disappointing. As the door swung open, 2 security guards entered the room. Without meeting my gaze, Harrington instructed, escort Mr. Price out of the building. He is no longer part of our team. As a guard seized my arm, the sensation barely registered with me. Thoughts whirled around in my head. I glanced at Evelina, yet she remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the ground. The guards cut me off before I could utter a word. They yanked me from my seat and paraded me through the office. Onlookers gazed intently. The whispers reached my ears, the soft murmurs of judgment echoing around me. When they finally cast me out onto the sidewalk, it felt as though I had lost it all. I remained rooted to the spot, gazing at the structure, a dull ache pulsing in my head. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. A note. Evelina, I've lost it all. I shut my eyes tightly, clutching my phone with such intensity that my hands began to tremble. I had as well.